Hello there. This is Honest to Klaud. I am Eric Elliott, and this is AngryTastycakes. So, right at the back, I drew this. It's like a pastry with the angry face that I drew on it.
I see it now. Oh, I was reading the text on the bag. I didn't even
No, it
see
just says mini apple pie. That's it.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Where does the name AngryTastycakes come from? Are we ever going to learn the government?
Do you want my villain origin story arc?
Your villain origin story?
Yeah, or do you want my quick and dirty summary of where it came from?
Wherever you want to go.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you the most anticlimactic answer to that kind of question. So I was in high school, and I had a really bad day, and I was incredibly pissed off. I don't know what it was. I can't remember what made me so mad, but I was just such in a bad mood. And then I get home, and it turns out that, I was like 15 at the time, 14, 15. Turns out my mother at the time, she had bought Little Debbie snack cakes and had them on the counter.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, screw it. And I went upstairs and I threw on my Xbox and I created a name, and I was mad, and I saw the cakes, and that's it. That's pretty much it.
How old were you?
I was 14, 15. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were like a little kid.
No, I was 14 or 15. Yeah. Yeah. Freshman in high school. I remember that much. And I just came home pissed off at the world for something.
So did that just continue being like your tag on whatever system or whatever game you're playing?
Yeah, I'm an original on everything.
So are you comfortable on the internet saying what your like actual like first name is? I don't need to know your last name.
Yeah, that's fine. My first name's Lloyd. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
I don't want to kind of insulting, but like you give me Lloyd energy. I don't know what that means, but I don't mean that as an insult.
Yeah, I used to hate it, and then and then I started playing this game back in the day called Tales of Symphonia, and the main character was named after me. And I was like, you know what? It ain't so bad after all. Okay. So I'll live with that.
But yeah, like if my audience doesn't know who you are, it just means that they are not looking at the playlist I give them of every time I appear.
Yeah.
On live Friday nights, and two occasions when it wasn't Friday because of Star Wars Celebration. Like I give you all my appearances, and I made a separate one just for the live videos, and like, I'm going to be honest, since I'm the first one on, a lot of times I don't stay. Or I'll check it out like days later of who else was on. Not because I don't think anyone else has like good opinions or has good jokes. It's not because of that. It's just like, well, I remember like back when like the first few months, like I was deep in school, and I was like had to do readings, I had to write, annotated, I had to write bibliographies and all that. And I was just like,
your time was limited.
Yeah, my time was limited. Or sometimes, like, the day just felt long, and I just like, I just want to watch TV and then go to sleep. So don't take it as an insult, but I did like start rewatching your appearances, starting off from our hot takes, and boy, did you have some hot takes. I had forgot how divisive your first set of words were of like. Say it. I mean, okay. I agree that Emperor is mustache twirling, and unless you go deep into some of the books, the complexity is not there.
Yeah, that was my biggest issue with him overall.
But like, I would argue that Maul actually has some decent complexity, and most of that is because of the Clone Wars, 3D animated cartoon.
Yeah, and Rebels. You can't forget Rebels.
Yeah, Rebels. They did like I thought the way they killed him off. Like, I was surprised by how mature and smart that was for something that's like. Let's be honest. Rebels is primarily intended for younger audience, but he just like dies in his arm after just like 3 little slices of the lightsaber, and he's down. I'm just like, wow. and he's having like a weird kind of like pseudo touching moment with the man who chopped off his legs. I was surprised how well that worked.
It kind of just shows how deeply Maul truly hated things. Not just any one thing, but he was like Darth Sion light. Like, he just hated people. And it didn't matter who they were.
Who's Darth Sion?
He was an Old Republic Sith Lord.
Okay.
He was basically a walking corpse. He was held together using his dark side force energy and his literal anger, where the only way that he could theoretically die is if he chose to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing you'll know from me is that my Legends knowledge is very limited.
I got you.
And I think part of it is that, like I've mentioned before that I have ADHD. So putting that much attention into a book when I was a kid, I'm like, no. I'm like, if it's not for a grade to make sure that I pass this class, like if I had to go to a Legends class in elementary school or middle school, I would get through it.
Yeah.
But like for a long time, reading something with no pictures as a little kid was a chore for me. And like now I'm starting to get into the books a little bit. Like I'll be honest, like a decent portion of them are from this current canon. Like the book that I'm about halfway through is Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher, which gives contextualization to Rise of Skywalker. And from what I've heard from people that know way more about Legends, like it does go into like some of the Legends ideas concerning the Sith, as far as Exegol goes, that they've been trying to fold in more. Which I'm just like, okay, cool. I'll trust your word on it. Yeah. And I'm starting to read this book.
Oh, the Darksaber one, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm still in the first chapter, but I'm liking the way it's just breathing and it's just working with stories, not trying to like throw a bunch of things at you at once, except for like we call it the previously on kind of one page. You're just like, oh, we have a character named Callista.
Yeah.
And
I don't know where
her brain was in a computer on a ship, and it went into one of the students of Luke, and now he's horny for a student. I'm just like, this is a lot.
Yeah, those 90s books, they didn't really hold back.
Yeah,
they truly didn't.
Like they weren't afraid to just go, fuck it.
I loved reading them. I think Shadows of the Empire, Dark Forces, and Air were my favorite, and then I lost them as soon as they brought in the Yuzan Vong. I was done. I was like, even I'm finding this to be too far gone from Star Wars. I can't
almost everything I've heard about Yuzan Vong, I'm just like, I'm not feeling them.
Yeah, I don't like them at all. They're basically like
they're like xenomorphs crossed with like Kryptonians
and mixed with an Islamari because they're immune to the Force.
And I would say like Man of Steel kind of Kryptonians, because I think their aesthetic is like a little more akin to like what Zod and his team wore.
Yeah, and I don't know. I read 4 of those books, and I was already chalked. I was done. I couldn't do it. Like I gave it a fair shot.
Yeah, I think the problem with it is like they are way too OP.
Yeah, and you know how they won?
Like,
I don't know if you care about spoilers if you haven't gotten to it, but do you know how the New Republic won? They gave them a cold.
They gave them a what?
A cold.
Oh,
cold. Swear to God. Like, they built these Yuzan Vong to be like some unstoppable force with their biological ships and their ships that can create gravity wells and
they get taken down by summer flu.
And they get taken down by the damn swine flu. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It was such an anticlimactic goddamn experience. Like, I remember reading this in the book and I just went, no. Because like
it just shows like I'm not gonna say they didn't have nuggets of good ideas on the way. But it just shows that they had to do something to like a lot of stories. Eventually, they had to be like, okay, and everything was pretty cool. Like nothing was super hectic, and they're just like they built this up to be way too big because like on a creative level, they're just like, okay, we don't want to just keep bringing a new empire or the remnants of this and the blah 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 blah, like because it's so far removed of like how much they try to fit in to make like, oh, then the Sith and the Mandalorians fought like thousands of years ago. Now it's just like, what do we do next? And you're just like, well, let's have a alien race from another dimension come through and just kill 60 billion people. What?
One of which had a moon chucked on him. Rest in peace, Chewbacca. But like it just, I can, and of all the things when Disney bought Star Wars, okay, when Disney bought them, you know, I admit I was nervous, but of all the things that they retconned that I was actually thankful for, it was the Yuuzhan Vong. When they got rid of the EU, I was happy to see them not part of canon anymore, because from a creative side, like, where can you possibly go from there that's going to top that? You know,
if there was anything from Legends that proved that we have to clean, it's going to be Yuuzhan Vong. Yuuzhan Vong is the biggest what the fuck of the Legends continuity.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's the best way to describe them, really. It's just they threw something at a wall to keep Star Wars relevant until the prequels came out.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's honestly what they were. They were just like, okay, let's just do something crazy off the wall. We don't really care. I mean, I shouldn't say that they don't really care, but like, they threw something at a wall to keep Star Wars relevant through the late 90s until the prequels came out. That's really what it feels like.
So I think we can touch more on like things that we've like talked about on live. I hear you're a fan of Jedi Rocks.
Greatest #1 single on the Billboard Top 100.
I've never liked Jedi Rocks, even as like a little kid. I'm just like, this takes me out of the movie. It makes my skin crawl. I'm like, why am I looking at this dude's saliva?
I think that's kind of why I enjoy it, though, is because it is so goofy and crazy. But at the same time, like, I do admit, when I'm sitting there watching Return of the Jedi, I dread that scene coming up. I dread it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, we're in the middle
coming
of
up.
Jabba the Hutt's palace here. It's dark. It's gross.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be gritty. And then all of a sudden, Size Noodles comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and like, since I was watching that as a kid and like through my teens, like I have watched the original song. I'm just like, this is like, I'm not gonna say like it's a banger, but it fits the tone and doesn't take me out, and it just feels like it's part of the world.
You're talking about the one where Ula was dancing, right?
Well, Ula dances a little bit in both. But it's not until the special editions that we see that she like almost we see the Rancor coming towards her, like, you know, after not seeing it.
Yeah.
But you do see the original Size Studio puppet like close up. You can still see it in the special edition, like in the background. They just like forgot to digitally remove it. Like, I'm not gonna say, like, to me, Size Studios has never looked like good.
No,
it doesn't matter if it's CG or puppet. Like, it's never been an impressive design. But I will always prefer, for the most part, tactility. I mean, the Yoda and Phantom Menace, the puppet, you know, that looks a bit wonky, but I don't consider it awful.
I think it was just different considering how much the movie was CGI, and then you have a prop puppet come in.
Well,
I think that's what took
I don't
me
know
out
about that, because you know, obviously the sequels have like a lot of CG, but they're much better at blending things and not just having everything and just like boom, green screen.
Yeah.
But like, I know a lot of people like felt weird about Yoda in Last Jedi and the way he looked. I'm just like, I don't care.
He was very Empire, and I kind of appreciated how he looked in that one. He was very Empire.
Like, I will admit, like, he does look different from the way we initially saw him, but that's because they went to the original model and they actually got back the lady who painted his eyes from all those years ago. Like, that's dedication and love to the craft.
Prop masters in movies just don't get enough credit. They truly don't. They really don't.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. And how's your forklift cage injury?
Oh man, listen. Okay, it's fine. Long story short,
Okay.
but I haven't gone near it since, and I refuse to go near it because
I feel you. I
yeah,
know exactly how that is.
like it was maybe 3 inches off the floor, but that's 3 inches of where I had 1,500 pounds on my foot.
Like
Like,
a couple months ago, I had a little bit of an injury. I was on my school campus. I used the restroom on the bottom floor, right? There was water linking from the bathroom above, and it started seeping through the ceiling, and a heavy ceiling tile fell on my back while he was in the bathroom. And my back tensed up so bad that it took me, it was like, it took me like twice as long to get across, like a crosswalk with the little numbers. Like I had to wait in the middle, like 30 seconds, I had to wait in the middle. 30 seconds, boom. It took me a whole minute.
so it sounds like you
Normally, I
got
would
smacked
just,
by a sheetrock tile, not just like a little gypsum one, but like
yeah, like there was no like no piping in it, but because of the water like made it heavy, like
oh
it
yeah,
made it worse, and so much like the my skin and muscles hitting it wasn't the worst of it. It was the way my body reacted to it
yeah.
because it was just shock, and I couldn't get out of it for a while, and I missed my first class, well, my first classes because of that. And maybe I should figure out how to sue whatever department. I haven't gotten around to that.
Statute of limitations.
I'm
at
a
this
big
point.
procrastinator.
Yeah.
If there's anything that you learn about me, can you explain Ochi of Festoon?
Yeah. Okay. So there's some backstory here. It's Ochi the Festooned, by the way.
Yeah. I know Ochi of Bestoon from Rise Skywalker and all that.
So Chris had a bit of an issue, I want to say last year, where another podcast group, I'm not going to name them for, professional courtesy and whatnot, but he had a bit of an issue with them. He was using a puppet, as we know, Lando, the little Lando puppet. He had little skits and what have you. And this other podcast group went after him for it, essentially. And
wait after him for using a puppet?
Yeah, because they said that they were doing it first, and it was a whole thing, So I'm still trying to find
the copyright on puppet usage. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to find a puppeteer, puppet creator. I don't know what the term is for them. Puppet, whatever. Someone who makes it, but I want it done in the Muppet style. Okay.
Yeah.
And I figured since he can't use the Lando puppet, because that was the issue, like more specifically was the use of the Lando puppet. I want to get him one called Ochi the Festooned, and it's basically like Ochi as a Muppet, but he's got like an old school Napoleon style military jacket, just loaded with medals.
Would his mouth like do a Kermit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Cool. And I think I just thought it was funny, but I can't seem to find anyone in my area that does it. So I've been having to search elsewhere, and I just haven't found one that I kind of like. Like the portfolios are good, but there's not one that I like enough to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my expertise is not in that. Like I'm bad at sewing. So I guess we can get into some of the reactions from you from some of the things I've said on our channel. Like I've been known as the guy who says wild stuff on live. Now I've told Pete, like, you may not agree with me, but I have to be one of the funniest people to say things, because like we got Zillow Ray, we got Mutt being Snoke, we have me exploring the incestuous intentions of Luke and Leia. You knew this was coming up.
I did.
Particularly, you wanted it to be brought up. You're just like, oh, like
know?
I know this is gonna be terrible, but it's also gonna be like I'm never gonna forget it.
Yeah.
And so some of the other things are, just kind of my opinion. Like I thought, the last 2 episodes of season 3 of Mandalorian were just okay. Because I thought they could do so much more with, Din Djarin's character.
Yeah.
I would have loved it so much if, like, I'm not saying like the armor had to be the villain, like the main arcing villain, but I think he could have fought back more to go against the status quo of what their their group is about. About always wearing the helmet and doing this and doing that. Like I think it would be way more powerful and like way stronger of like a character arc if he's just like, you know what, I'm gonna start my own clan. I'm leaving y'all.
Well, he did.
I'm appreciative of what you taught me.
Yeah.
But I know there's other Mandalorians out there. I'm going to find them, and we're going to figure out something we can do to be more democratic.
I mean, he did start his own clan. He's Mudhorn, and that's
like two two individuals. It's not much of a clan.
But I mean, it all depends on what you make of it. Mandalorians don't really have a set thing for how their clan are, but I truly do. You good, my guy?
Damn, I know you heard that. I was anticipating thunder. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm getting one too. I don't blame you. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like the armor really showed off like how opportunistic she truly is. Like she didn't act on anything until the timing was right. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was just like, no, I got to make this benefit me somehow. Like she's very opportunistic, which is kind of on track and on par with what the Death Watch was. They were very opportunistic when they were on Concordia and stuff like that. So like, I don't know. I feel like he did okay. I feel like they did all right. But yeah, like you said, like the last 2 episodes were like, I didn't particularly like jump out of my seat. Like,
I also thought they could have done way more interesting and not so much like boom, this with Moff Gideon.
Like when I remember season 2 when I first saw Luke coming down that hallway, I was crying. I was so excited. I was crying. I was bawling like a bitch. It was awful. And then like season 3 came out and I'm sitting there watching it and I just didn't have any of those moments truly that made me feel like any particular emotion. Like I thought it was cool when the crate, like well, not the crate dragon, when the mythosaur was underwater. I really truly wish they did more with that.
Like what got me to be like feel like not necessarily like crying but emotional things is the whole story they did with Elia King and Pershing. I was like, okay, this is very interesting, and we're seeing a different side to the New Republic that like only book readers would like really know about, and like we're sowing the seeds of like connecting the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. I'm just like, and I'm also a Pershing stan. I admit that. He's my favorite character in Mandalorian.
Yeah, I love him as a character.
But just like putting him up to that torture device, it's like I felt that.
I'm about to hit you with a theory.
Go ahead.
Those devices are going to be used to brainwash the kids that are kidnapped by the First Order.
By the who?
The First Order. When they start kidnapping the kids, they're going to be put into those machines to make them forget. Because it's a memory altering device. Because if you like in Rise of Skywalker, like Finn doesn't know where he comes from. I forgot the lady's name that he becomes friends with.
I mean, but like, see, that's something that they can put in their back pocket if they want to do. Because with Finn, he was just very, very small.
Yeah.
And it can be very hard for a grown man to try to remember something that happened when he was 3.
Right, but if you actually like, I shouldn't. None of them remember. anything before their time as a stormtrooper. Like when you run across
except for like Phasma.
Right. And that's also in the games too, like Star Wars Battlefront 2, if you play the campaign, which is canon, I believe. The Resurgence DLC, something, I think it's called Resurgence or something. You play as Iden Versio when she is an officer in the New Republic, and her whole story is chasing down kids that are getting kidnapped by the Empire for a new program. Like, and then it turns out that leads into the First Order as well. So they're like kidnapping kids, and that's where Finn is like, I don't know anything before I was a stormtrooper. I just remember being a stormtrooper.
Okay.
So my theory is that these kids are kidnapped. They take the technology from those machines, they mass produce it, and then they stick them in there as kids, erase their memory, and then they can start them from childbirth. Because what's more loyal than a kid, who is indoctrinated at a young age?
Okay. Now we got super highbrow intellectual. We got to drop it down a peg. Okay. Back to the incest.
Yeah, I'm gonna take my hammer and just hit me in the head a couple times.
The thing about like Alabama, like I know the joke, but
this is not the lead up.
But I found out the most incestuous state is not Alabama.
Tennessee.
It's Kentucky.
Oh, well, that's not surprising in the slightest either, I guess.
But yeah, like when I said that Luke in New Hope and Empire wants to smash his sister, I'm serious. Like there's a scene in New Hope where after he has seen the hollow message that he clamors saying, "Bring her back," he bites his lip. Making ass Poe Dameron will bite the lip. And like we have Leia in Return of the Jedi saying, "Somehow I've always known." So once again, I come to, if you always known, then you didn't see it that much of an issue. I'm not saying necessarily you wanted to end up with your brother, but if you go into some of the Legends comics and novels, like they go way more into the will they or won't they with these two characters. Like they kiss quite a few times in those books because the writers couldn't see the future of what a movie like 6 years would do. And heck, even in canon, there was a moment. Like you ever read the IDW Star Wars comics?
No, I stuck with Dark Horse primarily.
No, I'm talking about like the current run.
No.
Okay, like I know it's more intended for kids, but I still enjoy some of the stories that they do. And probably one of my favorite ones is the one they do with Luke and Leia. It's like a reoccurring thing they did for like 5 issues. It would be like the first story. Okay. There's a moment where it's supposed to be right after the award ceremony, and they're like on a ship with like 2 characters that you're just like, okay, they're probably gonna die. They're just like 2 like who gives a shit characters.
Yeah.
Like they don't have plot armor, obviously. But there's a moment where Leia is like in a new fancy dress, and Luke is drawn in this comic just kind of gawking at her and like getting nervous. So even in like recent canon, like where we're well past knowing that they are siblings, there's a writer still like playing with the idea that he's a simp.
Yeah. That's a lot of them though as well. Like even during the 90s, early 2000s comic runs.
Well, but this comic is like from like 2015.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not saying that like the most recent stuff hasn't played around with it either.
It's consistent.
Theme. Yeah.
But it's also crazy to put that in a comic that's more intended for children. Like that just blows my mind. Like I took a screenshot. I'm just like, am I seeing this right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no,
I'm not just going crazy.
You're seeing it right.
Now, if you want to go more metaphysical, Would you say that midichlorians have an urge to like feed off each other, like connect to strengthen itself?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's a symbiote, really.
Okay.
Like, the Jedi keep them alive, and the Chlorians kind of allow them to use their ability to channel the Force,
Okay.
right? So, like, they're in the cells. If I'm remembering the lore right, the midichlorian is the powerhouse of the cell.
Oh, it's in the nucleus.
Yeah. It's a powerhouse of the cell essentially, and each one only has one. But depending on the concentration of them, like there could be one midichlorian in 1,000,000 cells.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or in Anakin's case, there could be, you know, 10,000, 100,000, whatever within 1,000,000 cells. So, like, I think it really just comes down to the concentration, like the overall number, not necessarily that they work together.
Okay.
I think it's the Jedi that kind of coalesces the power of the midichlorians rather than the midichlorians coalescing themselves.
But like, obviously, if a Jedi and a Jedi have a child, then like the likelihood that the child is going to have slightly higher count is like makes sense, right?
We'd have to do a Punnett square to figure that out, and I don't remember my 10th grade
It's like,
biology.
is it a recessive or dominant?
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, because there have been cases in the lore where a child has been born to two Force sensitive parents, and they don't have any Force sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and vice versa. They've been born to two non-Force sensitives, and suddenly they're. I mean,
I
Shmi
never
is the perfect
anticipated
example.
it would like skip a generation.
Yeah, like Shmi is the perfect example. She's not Force sensitive, and Anakin was born from her. You know
But
how much of that was artificial, of course,
yeah,
remains up
because
to,
he's
you
he's
know.
born like Jesus.
Yeah, that's the thing, like immaculate conception and whatnot. But like, you know, it just I don't believe. I mean, Obi-Wan. Okay, we'll use Obi-Wan. He was born to two non-Force sensitive parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he became one of, if not the greatest duelist in Jedi Order history.
Yeah, but do you think part of it is that their parents may have high midichlorian count, but they don't have any inclination, or it's like dormant inside of them?
Punnett Square. Like, that's the thing is like from my understanding and what I've read and everything, like it just it depends. It really does. And
Yeah.
remember the saying that the Force has mysterious ways, like the Force.
Well, one of the reasons I asked that, at least in canon, is that okay? Well, obviously, Luke and Leia are the child of Anakin, Darth Vader, and they have a strong Force connection.
Mm-hmm.
And like I always thought it was like okay, a large part of this is lineage based, and that's what a lot of people, that me included, that love Last Jedi are just like, oh, how is Leia able to pull herself to the ship? I'm just like, well, you know, think about who she's blood related to.
Yeah. Well, lineage. I mean, lineage does play a role, and there was, I believe, it was a comic. Lineage does play a role, but it's not always definitive. So after Order 66 happened, when the Empire started storming the remains of the Jedi Temple, Jocasta Nu showed up. And she was a librarian. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Yeah, she has the lightsaber gun.
No, she was the librarian.
No, like in the comics, she has a lightsaber gun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I mean, she shows up at the archive, and she was trying to take the holocrons and keep them safe from the Empire, because those holocrons contained the list of all of the families and the lineages that had Force sensitivity in them, and she couldn't let them fall into the Empire's hands. Ultimately, she failed because, you know, Jocasta Nu versus Darth Vader in his prime, like, who's going to win that toss up? But like, so lineage does play a role, but it's not always definitive.
Yeah, like because you know there's also the like, I'm not religious, but the way your spirit is. Like we know in Star Wars, like spirits are a thing because we have Force ghosts and all that. The intuitiveness to like be one with the world, whether that's through peace or that's through just sheer anger, like with the Sith. So I think the large part of it is mindset, and I think depending on how the child is raised, will help inform like eventually like whether they like much like a X-Men, like when the power appears and like how they use it, that kind of thing. Like
Now we
when
enter
Magneto does it, like in the movies, he like crushes like Nazi helmets, and he's like breaking apart the cage because there's fear, there's anger that he's has for his people and his mother and that kind of thing.
Yeah, now we enter the nature versus nurture debate.
Yeah. But one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is that, okay, you might need to bump your head a little bit. How force sensitive would a child between Luke and Leia be?
What do you mean? Like,
well,
if they were,
I'm thinking about like they both.
I don't like.
What?
We're entering territory I don't like. I feel like I'm going to be on a list if I answer this question.
Well, okay. Well, let's think about two characters that, as far as we know, have no blood relation. Kylo and Rey.
So,
with Kylo and Rey's, like, if they had a child when like they were supposed to be seen as a light in the dark before Kylo's redemption, would any of that light and dark like kind of neutral each other out if they had a child?
I think we'd wind up with another like Jason Solo type situation.
Okay.
Where
he's supposed to be like super conflicted, right?
Yeah. Like you have a Skywalker and then you have a Palpatine.
And
they come together and have a kid. You're joining two of the most powerful bloodlines in the galaxy. That child is going to have to grapple with the whole idea that on one hand, my father was redeemed. Oh, okay. I have so many issues with Rise of Skywalker. Okay. On one hand,
I have my issues too. So like, you're not alone. Like, I'm not a stan of that movie. Last Jedi, I'm a stan for.
Yeah, I'll explain, and I'll explain. You have a Skywalker who was redeemed, who was basically Vadered. Okay, he did some horrible shit, and then like he became, a benevolent being essentially, right? And then on the other hand, his mother, who was rejecting the idea of being a Palpatine, but still a Palpatine, right? By blood. Make that clear. By blood, you're still a Palpatine.
Yeah, like because Dathan is supposed to be like strand cast, like combination kind of thing.
Right.
He didn't come from Palpatine's loins.
Yeah, but indirectly, kind of. It's so strange.
Yeah. They don't say that in the movie.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot to get into. There's already way too much trying to be explained.
Yeah.
But in the book, they go into it for our audience that doesn't know.
So I feel like for a kid to come out of a situation like that when it comes to being force sensitive, one, he's grappling with the idea of being a Skywalker, savior of the galaxy, but he's also done some pretty horrible shit. Your grandfather is, or uncle in this case, is Luke Skywalker, the boogeyman to the Empire, right? Like the one being that everyone feared inside the Empire. But then on the other hand, you have Palpatine, and he's like, my grandpappy did some really shitty things. What do I do? Because if I claim one or the other, I forsake the other, and now I lose part of my identity in the process. That's going to manifest some crazy Freudian level stuff. Like, tell me about your childhood. No, I don't think I will. Okay. Like for a Force user, that's going to be, I think that's why they didn't explore that, because there's too much to try and.
Yeah, like there are some Freudian tropes in the Star Wars saga, especially when it comes to like what I've mentioned before, like I don't think necessarily in a sexual way, but like there is an Oedipal complex with Anakin of like his attachment to his mother, and when he gets new father figure that's
immediately
isn't the right one for him. Like Obi-Wan was not the right one for him. Qui-Gon was.
He needed a father. He didn't need a brother. He needed a father.
Yeah, and like
not a friend, rather.
He's trying to be both.
Yeah,
and that's where he messed up, because like how do you try to direct them of like, oh, you can be with the score, you can't be. Like, brother says something different than a father does.
Yeah. A brother encourages you to act like a fool sometimes.
Yeah, and eventually when like things don't go his way, he doesn't get on the Jedi Council. You know, he starts to hide his marriage. You know, he hears about that only the Sith can protect his wife. He lashes out and he puts, I would argue, at least 50% of the blame on Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
He puts up 50%, and everyone else is just kind of like in a lump. It's like we got Obi-Wan and we got the Jedi, and like after a point, he's just like they all suck. They can all die. They can all eat it.
Well, I mean, how deep do you want to go with this? Let me ask you that question.
Now, I'm listening. What's your thought?
The Jedi became so dogmatic. When I mentioned Mitra Surik on Friday, I meant that legitimately. Like, she adapted the Jedi code to not be as rigid and strict. She was the right-hand general to Darth Revan during the Mandalorian.
Yeah, like they are a decaying institution.
Yeah, and she knew that. She knew that. And it was because that they became so rigid and strict that they couldn't adapt to threats within and without. And like when you, for lack of a better term, just shit on people trying to explore within the confines of what you believe in, it's gonna breed some resentment. And this is definitely, I think the prequels are as close to the 90s novels as we're going to get in that respect. Like, I mean, Luke Skywalker was married. He had a kid. He reformed the Jedi Council and the Jedi Order to be more like, listen, you can't forbid people outright from doing what's natural. Kiadi Mundi, for instance, had 4 wives. The dude looks like a penis, and he had 4 wives. And like the thing is like he's on the Jedi Council. He's a not a grandmaster. He's a Jedi Master on the Council.
Does he still have 4 wives in canon, or is it just a legend thing?
No, he did 100%.
No, I'm saying like in like modern canon, does he still have them? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it was part of his culture.
I'm not read up on my Kiadi Mundi lore. I'm sorry. He's like one of my least favorite Jedi.
I don't like him either. Stupid looking weirdo. Anyway, so like, I think Anakin, for him, when he sees the hypocrisy, and it was hypocritical for a lot of things, and that's what Mitra Surik also saw, was that like the Jedi Order, because
the Jedi Order is supposed to have like a lot of parallels to like pre-Luther Catholic Church.
Yeah,
where like you have priests like pay indulgences every time they sleep with a prostitute, and like they're not
and
going
Mitra
by
runs
the
up
words
and
they're
nails
saying.
those 99 prostitutes or whatever to the door.
Pope Leopold X is having like, this is a lineage of like 10 people like where they keep having children. You're not allowed to do that if you're like even as lowly as a priest, let alone a pope.
Yeah, and that's what makes, I think, the Old Republic a little bit more compelling than most of the modern canon, just because like Surik did see that and she wanted to change it, you know, and she effectively did, right? Like, and then you have Luke Skywalker in the 90s. He did exactly that with Kyle Katarn as his right-hand man. They reformed the council, they reformed the order, they brought it more up into line with like, okay, we can just be people on top of being peacekeepers, right? But the Jedi Order that Anakin came into was obviously in its last throes. They were in their death throes ideologically and stuff like that. Like, they became so dogmatic that like when Anakin saw the hypocrisy, well, Mundi has 4 wives, and you know that character walking down the hall who has a 8-page story on damn Wikipedia, you know, they have
he also like, he set fire to all those Geonosians.
Yeah, he
did. You know, that wasn't a good look, bro.
No, after they done built the Death Star, they just set fire to their home. Yeah. But like, he just sees the hypocrisy and he's like, well, why am I getting shit on for this when all I'm doing is pursuing the same thing that they are? Where's make that make sense? And I think that's where like that dogma really comes from. Like he started hating them. And what's always funny to me is that during these kind of debates, I'm not saying that this is a debate, but like, you know,
we're pretty calm.
Yeah,
right now.
I'm gonna quote the dumpster fire that is Twitter discourse. No one seems to bring up the whole idea that, like, damn, where was I going with it? I had a whole thought. Shit. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, no one ever seems to bring this up, that, like, yeah, Palpatine tricked him and he did it well. But, like, what he didn't seem to understand was that, like, Anakin wasn't a great character in this regard, because he never really explored the idea that he is the reason everything happened. Palpatine's like, this is going to happen. You can join me. You know, we can stop it. That was a bold-faced lie.
You know, I'll say, like, when it comes to Star Wars, some themes that I've never, like, really cared about at all is Destiny, Prophecy, and Chosen One.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think we don't need any of them to be, like, said explicitly. Like, just have the story, just kind of suggest it. But the fact that we have characters, like, debating is like, I guess he is the chosen one. You have Samuel Jackson, like, nodding his head. And
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care. Get it out of here.
You mean you don't like tax law being brought into your space adventure movie?
Well, to me, tax law is different. Like, is it a good idea to put into a movie that's supposed to be appealed to kids? Absolutely not.
In the books,
like,
I don't care. Going
like it was not thought out well from a, like, movie blockbuster storing narrative. But does it add to lore and what's going on? Yes, I will say that. It fits way better in a novel.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Way easier to digest it. You're probably a little more mature if you're watching it. Well, I mean, reading it. Because a lot of 4-year-olds are not reading a book like this.
I mean, let's be real.
Let's keep it a buck. It's probably, you probably won't start reading this until, like, you're 10, maybe your teens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas, like, when I came out, or when I was born in 92, Phantom Menace came out in 99. I was 7 years old, and they're talking about taxes and trade deficits, and I was like, I just wanted to pew pew shooty boom booms. Like, I don't fucking what you know.
I'm like, you haven't even, like, that's an age that you probably haven't even, like, bought, like, a food item and realized that it's not the same price. Like, brain that maybe in a process, like, the Snicker bar is, like, you know, like 15 cents more than it's advertised.
Yeah.
So how are you going to introduce it to, like, a legion of, like, new watchers?
Yeah.
You know, like munchkins out in the theater. Like, I'm sure that there's some people that saw it when they were young, and obviously, like, you know, they've, like, fought back a little against, like, some of the more upset, you know, Gen X fans growing up. But I still feel like a lot of them still are not just like, taxes, whatever. Like, even though they pay taxes and they have to, like, report to the IRS now, like, I don't care.
The IRS will find you. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm just like, well, I don't own a home and I don't work. You don't report much of anything.
Yeah. We just had, like, a 30 billion credit clone army. Where's the IRS? Get the IRS on them. They'll find Cypher Diaz, no damn problem.
Yeah, like, all they have is just a big, very sketchy bank called the Banking Clan. That's pretty much all they got in Star Wars.
It's funny you should say that, though, because Palpatine actually ran part of the banking shit. That's how he got money.
You say a little louder?
It's funny that you should bring that up, because Palpatine, his whole family was in banking.
That makes absolute sense.
That's how he got all his money.
Fits right in line with the way George Lucas would write something for his villain. I mean, he had, what was it? Character Lot Dodd and Newt Gunray, like, be stand-ins for, like, real senators that were, like, big in the 90s. Like, and he made Phineas Valorum to, like, be a stand-in for, like, Bill Clinton. So it's, like, very, like, once you start going into, like, with actual ideas, where it's like, okay, it's a little more on the nose than you realized.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's right there in front of your face. You just have to look for it.
Yeah. Okay. What in? Okay. I once again mentioned that I don't know that much about Legends. I'm starting to read this book. I've been listening to like one of the like Obi-Wan as a Padawan books. Like because some of those books you can find in audio form on like YouTube, and like I'll just like while I'm doing other things I'll listen to it. But what is the great thing about KOTOR and SWTOR? Because I'm gonna be honest. KOTOR, I'm like I understand a little more. SWTOR, I'm just like none of this, like how it looks and the way people play it, like none of it like really interests me.
I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so Knights of the Old Republic, I think from a fan standpoint and from strictly a gaming standpoint, it's one of the greatest stories ever told in gaming. Not let alone Star Wars, right?
I'll tell you that I do know like the last kind of like twist. I do know that. So like I've been ruined by that by I think like Christian Harloff, like Collider.
He does not have a steel trap for a mouth. He'll just go for it. No, so that's the thing is back in the day, 2003, when the game first came out, people were like, it's a Star Wars RPG. Shit. And it's also exclusive on the brand new console Xbox. Shit. Okay, so they wound up buying both for each other. And BioWare was in their rare form. Okay, they just came off of like Baldur's Gate. They were working on something else. And it's kind of interesting how this game actually came about. They had a year. They had a year to do it. And they split their team because after Knights, they started working on Jade Empire. So they had to split their team on top of doing it in like a year, which was right. So what made it compelling was the fact that it was a new setting. It had never been explored before. This is the first inkling of the Old Republic. Like it was mentioned, Obi-Wan mentioned it and I think Empire or something like that. But like, it was the first time we ever got to see what it was, the galaxy was 4,000 years in the past, right? And it takes place in like 3997 BBY, I think. Yeah, something like that. And the Sith are winning. And that just was unheard of, back then, right? Because, you just had the sequels, not the sequels, the prequels come out where, obviously the Sith won that one, but then you have the original trilogy that it goes into. So ultimately the good guys still win, right?
Well, I would say they won, but it wasn't like the flag pin wasn't like put down was not for the Sith. It was for the Empire because I'm like you got like two Sith on your team.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And
I'm just like it's not like the Sith really are like really running everything like just like everywhere. Like Sith are like it's like that's the flag.
And that's what just the way the characters were written, it was Star Wars, like you had the scrappy young kid who just wanted adventure. You had the Wookiee who was very cynical. You had the Mandalorian that was we were finally exploring Mandalorian culture at that time. Like, we knew that Jango Fett was one. We knew that there were references in the previous books and stuff like that, but like we never really explored it. So we had Canderous Ordo, first ever Mandalorian on screen. You had HK-47, which is just this bloodthirsty droid that if you're a fan of IG-88, you kind of know what that's like. But what set 47 apart was that he was actually a character. He wasn't just like a walking stick. You know what I mean? Like, he had character and he had one-liners, and the characters were just so well written. You got to go to Kashyyyk, you got to go to Manon, you got to go to Korriban in its prime. Like, it was just from a Star Wars lore nerd standpoint, Knights of the Old Republic was ticking every single box.
What about as like just a game itself, like mechanics and how you fight, that kind of thing?
By today's standards, outdated. 100%. It uses a standard D20 like as your standard tabletop RPG kind of thing. Like, I'm about to hit this enemy. It rolls a virtual die in the background to see if you're going to hit it. So it by today's standards, it ain't great. But like, even by then, it was like, whatever. But like, it kept you in there, like the combat was kind of jarring and it would automatically pause. And then like you would run up on an enemy and it would pause. And then you're like, okay, I can select my actions, what I want to do, or you can do it in real time. So they kind of gave you a little bit of a choice, but it was still that turn-based thing that was just kind of strange.
Yeah, like I already know I have controversial opinions when it comes to Star Wars, but at the same time, like I'm, like I don't, like as Nick would say, I'm not a dick about it. Like I've mentioned before on this channel that I think by far Don Glover performs Lando better than Billy D.
Now that's fighting words.
I think he's doing more with the overall performance. Don't get me wrong, I love Billy D. Like before we had Samuel Jackson in his heyday, he was the black guy in the movie,
Right?
and he was doing us, good. But I'm just like I don't think like as just a performance. Like I think his character is cool, and I love when I read anything, a book with him or a comic with him, I hear his voice. But I just don't think the performance is that great. But anyway, I'm not saying it's bad. Yeah. Don't take this out of context saying like, oh, he hates Billy D. No, I do not. But when it comes to SWTOR, I think one of the reasons that I just don't vibe with it, like I before I went up here, I was like, okay, I'm actually gonna watch some YouTube footage of people playing it, and I'm just like SWTOR. I'm just like, it doesn't feel right to me. And one of the reasons that I've never been a fan of like MO RPGs.
Yeah.
Like I remember one time when I was like younger, I played Warcraft. I'm just like, this kind of sucks.
Yeah.
That's what I thought for me personally. And like I don't like the bundles idea and the money thing. There's a lot of weird customization. There's a lot of voice acting that I really don't like personally in the game. Like it feels like way too hokey sometimes.
Largest amount of dialogue in a game to date, by the way. Fun fact.
Oh, cool. Like I appreciate what it did for the fans, what it did for the lore, like overall, especially in the Legends universe. But the game doesn't like really seem like anything for me. Like I was like I was watching it, I'm just like I don't want to play this. I just don't. I'm appreciative that other people love it, but it's not something I love.
Yeah, my issue with it is it's kind of like you. Like I like MMOs, I do. I play them in my off time, or if I want something, it's kind of brain dead where I can just chill, play an hour, and then not really miss anything if I put it down. You know what I mean? But like for some reason, SWTOR, I mean, you had 8 characters, 8 different classes. Well, yeah, eight classes, but they were mirrored to each other. So 4 and 4, they were mirrored to each other. And for me, like you're having to tell 8 separate stories, which all coalesce in one universe, where each character is going to take at minimum 80 hours, and I won't get the full story until I'm done with those 80 hours. Like, nah. and that was my thing. Like, I love SWTOR. I played the hell out of it, man. I sunk at least $1,000 into that one game over time. Like, I played the shit out of that game. And it was just at some point though, I got on one day and I was like, I'm bored. And I'm not saying that the expansions aren't good. I mean, the Infinite Empire, the Eternal Empire, Knights of the Eternal Throne or whatever it was. Awesome. There's a third faction. Oh, okay. Story-wise, I think the overall bubble was fine. You got the Cold War between the Republic and the Sith. The Sith destroyed the Jedi Temple on Coruscant and then left it as kind of like a middle finger. Like, yeah, we can do that. What can you do? It was just kind of a cool idea, but not in execution. It's an MMO through and through. It's stiff. It's rigid. It's kind of
now when it comes to like more traditional style games, I think Unleash is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I rock with the Unleash games. I really like Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I think that's really cool. I'm not really a fan really much at all of Shadows of the Empire. I think it's a bit overrated.
You don't like the Cliff Wampa? Or
I'm
fighting the
okay with the
Dianoga?
Cliff Wampa, but I'm just like I really don't care about Dash.
Yeah, he's just Han Solo.
And it was like, oh look, there's another IG-88. I'm just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And then boom, that's Boba Fett's ship and it explodes. I'm just like, cool, bro.
Yeah.
It's like I'm so like disinterested. Yeah,
Dark
it
Forces
just never.
is pretty cool.
And I've never been a fan of damn it, I forget his name. The one that looks like Piccolo.
Zizor.
Yeah, Prince Zizor Zizor. I'd never have liked him. I've never been a fan.
And that's where having. Okay, now we're gonna get into my whole issue with the sequels. Okay, it's if you're making a property like that and it's dependent upon outside media, outside of what you're introducing that character in, you lost me.
I will. I will give you that. Like you shouldn't have to read a book, read a comic to understand what's going on with this character. It should be seen as like, oh, isn't this a cool thing also that you didn't know?
It should be supplemental, not mandatory.
It should be supplemental. Like you know, like if I'm reading a comic series, I shouldn't have to read issue 0 to understand. It's a free comic day book to understand who the hell this main character is.
Yeah, and that was the problem with
they did that with Civil War 2, and I'm just like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, and then when the movies came out, it didn't match any of the books anyway.
I mean, I don't think it needs to add up in the grand scheme of things. Like I understand as fans, we want that, and we want to have the best continuity possible. But when it comes to different creators and different producers, like it's not going to line up perfectly. And that's how we got the disparity of Kanan's comics and what they did in Bad Batch.
Yeah. That was a firestorm online that day.
Yeah, I know. Dan from Boraxium would not stop it.
It got bad on both sides. They're like,
yeah,
and you're like,
and I understand it a little bit, but at the same time, I'm just like,
yeah,
another thing Nick said is that it's faking in space.
Yeah,
calm down a little bit.
Right. That's my thing. Like when it came to Shadows, I love Zizor, but only because I read the book.
Yeah.
If all you did was play the game, you weren't really going to care for him, and that's my problem. Like
I would say that Force Awakens, Last Jedi, you really don't have to read anything to like understand.
No, they did a pretty all right job of.
But Rise of Skywalker, like reading Adam Christopher's book gives it way more context.
Yeah, like
like he worked his ass off to make plot points work in that movie, because you have Lando saying, "Oh, we took down Ocho Bastoon." I'm just like,
who the hell is that? Right? Like,
sure, bro.
Is that good? Is that bad? Was he hard? What? Who the fuck is this guy?
Like, and one thing I'll get to before we end the show with a glup shitter is that this is a double-edged sword when it comes to retconning. Retconning can make have you lead to a very interesting story. It's like, oh, you didn't know this about this one thing, and like we expand on it. The backside of it is that you now make your audience have to choose: do they contextualize it with the retcon or without it?
Yeah.
From previous story. Like I watched Last Jedi, and I love it. Something that I cannot make my brain do while watching it because I love it so much is like, oh yeah, Luke knows that who Rey is and that she's a Palpatine. He's known this entire time. So when he says, "Where are you from, Rey?" Oh, he already knows.
Yeah.
I can't make my brain say that's what he's thinking. I have to see in the context of the movie was made.
Yeah.
Because it's trying to fit a square block into a circle hole. Like it just won't work for me.
Yeah,
I know intellectually that it's that way, but I can't enjoy a movie like that. It's like, oh, I now know this. I can't do it.
Yeah. And that I think like I'm not a sequel hater by any means.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't agree with that kind of thing because
Yeah.
there's always something good to be said, but like continuity wise, I mean, based on what you said about the Shadows of the Empire thing, like I feel like it's applicable now too. Like I think The Force Awakens was the strongest out of the three, and even then I still had some issues with it where it was like, who the fuck is the First Order? Why are they here? Who is Kylo Ren? Like I shouldn't have to read 3 books, a comic book, watch a deep dive video on Wikipedia. I shouldn't have to do that, you know, like it should be supplemental.
Yeah, I would say Force Awakens. I don't think it's the best story out there. I just think Last Jedi is, and it's the only one that touches me like immensely. And it's like if I was going to do like a YouTube tier list, is the one thing I'll put in S every time. Is the one thing. Like I understand. I've heard everyone's argument against it. I've heard everything.
Yeah.
I even heard some of the really toxic people online and what they say. But I can't take away just like, you know, nothing fills me with so much joy and so much like intentional sadness.
Yeah.
Than that movie. Like if I'm by myself, I might cry 3 times. You know, Force Awakens, I only get that one cry because of Han Solo.
Oh yeah, when he shows up on the wreckage. Yeah.
You know, when he's skewered.
Oh, you Rise of Skywalker. I might have misheard.
Like I do get emotional when he comes on the wreckage and says goodbye, but I never like shed a full tear from it.
Yeah.
Like it gets real close because I think that was like probably the best idea they had.
Yeah.
Overall, like I'm not gonna say there weren't like awesome things. Like I still love a lot of the lines Poe says. I think he's still fucking funny in that movie.
Oh, I love Poe. I love Finn. I love the main cast. Like I thought they were all pretty well done.
Yeah, but some of the decisions I'm just like I don't like when Poe says that like I'm not Leia, and then Finn says, "Well, you sure damn aren't." I'm just like, what? Huh?
What does that make sense?
Why?
Yeah, right.
You remember that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but let's get to the Gulf Shido. Let's start wrapping up. You know, we've been talking enough. We've been getting to know each other pretty well. You know, we'll see who slips up the live appearances. You know, for this Gulf Shido, we're going Legends.
Okay.
Now, it seems very appropriate that you're here because you are the Legends man, and also the Beard man.
Gimli, Light.
Do you know the character of Dromboid?
Actually, no. Sounds familiar. Okay. I feel like I've heard the name in passing.
Okay.
Does put that up here?
This look familiar?
Oh God. Yeah.
Does he look familiar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's a Amorphian.
Okay.
Which is Amorphia is supposed to be a planet, and he comes from it, and he's basically like a replicant. He's a very lifelike robot. I don't know how much circuitry he has. I don't know if he really has like anything organic. Maybe his skin is organic, like pseudo-organic. Because how are they gonna like explain the hair, that kind of thing. But yeah, he gives instructional videos, and the the voice on the cassette.
Holiday special guy.
Yes.
He was telling
this actor plays 3 characters. Yeah. He plays the volcano head guy.
Yep.
The chef. In drag. And this character.
Yeah.
This guy was working for his paycheck.
Yeah, he was.
And he was big comedy talk show actor back in the 70s in Harvey Korman. I accidentally called him Harvey Keitel once, and that's 2 very different actors. But yeah, he gives an instructional video of how to put a doohickey together, and Itchy watches it. And
that's a real tutorial, by the way. That wasn't made up for the holiday special.
Yeah,
that was an actual tutorial on how to use that machine.
Yeah, there's like weird points where like he's like almost like chopped and screwed it was like seeing like those music videos. I heard them. It was like whoa, 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 whoa. He does a little bit of that. He does the clicking of his tongue. He does like a weird hip thrust, like with his hand on his back. Yeah, they need to do like an iOS update or some kind of gear repairs on this man.
Well, all their computing power went to giving Chewbacca's grandfather VR porn. Okay, that's what it went.
It was at least soft core. It was not hardcore. Yeah. It was just suggestive enough to entice this man without teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just bizarre. Like I know some people say, I like, once again, I'm quoting Nick again. Nick says there's no bad Star Wars. I feel like you can make an exception for the holiday.
No, you can't. And I say this because B. Arthur's in it, and that's the whole reason the holiday special is worth it. Okay.
I mostly like the cartoon. Okay. I think it's the most consistent thing about it.
Oh, they introduced Boba Fett.
It's still weird as all hell.
Yeah.
Like Han's face looks like a cheese grater.
Yeah, it kind of does. Yeah. One of those old school Beatles animated movies.
Yeah. So, do you have any feelings and thought about John Boyd or the channel that I'm slowly working on?
No, John Boyd.
He's the GOAT.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I will say though that man put in hours for that paycheck. I will say that. But,
yeah, like you can clearly tell there's just points where they just rewind footage and just remix it, and like that's all they're doing.
Yeah.
Because it's unrealistic to try to expect an actor to do all that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, you can't.
Well, it was good having you, Lloyd, Sir, AngryTastycakes.
Angry Galifianakis.
Talking about Legends,
yeah,
Alabama, Anamorphians. Like we touched on it all. If you want to come back, just let me know. I can figure out how I can fit my schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
All right. This was Honest Klaud. I'm Eric Elliott. See you later.